Today we're talking about some of the biggest Marvel rivalries in history. These are characters who just downright hate each other. Nothing like a good old college rivalry to keep you sharp on your toes. If Victor Von Doom and Reed Richards, two of the smartest men in Marvel Comics, had teamed up together, the world would probably be a complete utopia. Unfortunately, Dr. Doom is a completely arrogant guy, and he is much more theoretical, whereas Reed is incredibly practical. Reed also seems to not respect boundaries, as in college he read his rival's research on trying to save his own mother and then proceeded to tell Doom all the ways it wouldn't work. Doom's arrogance led him to dismiss Reed, and then it turned out Reed was right, which led directly to the scarring of Doom's face. Their rivalry comes almost entirely down to the fact that Doom will never admit that Reed is smarter than him. What's interesting about this next one is that there probably wouldn't even be a Captain America without the Red Skull's existence. If it weren't for Johann Smith's activities in the Axis side of power during Marvel's World War II, then the plan for a super soldier to combat him may not have ever appeared. Stopping the Red Skull was one of Steve Rogers' first assignments, and his whole Captain America persona was created in stark contrast to the Red Skull, who had become an icon for his side of the war. As such, the rivalry between these two characters is one of the longest running ones in Marvel's history. Even after Captain America was frozen in ice for decades, came back to the world, Skull found a way to follow him. The mutant Rogue first started out as a villain in Marvel Comics. She was part of Mystique's Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and one of their first attacks on the Avengers involved ambushing a recently returned Danvers. Rogue, who was still learning to use her abilities, accidentally fully absorbed both Danvers' memories and her powers. The attack completely drained Carol of her powers and erased her mind, and then to add insult to injury, Rogue immediately chucked Carol off the Golden Gate Bridge. Luckily, Spider-Woman was there and able to rescue her, and Professor Xavier was able to restore her memories, but it wasn't complete. Carol remembered things, but it was more like watching a show about her life instead of actually having lived it. Carol regained her powers eventually, but her life was destroyed by a scared young woman who then had to deal with the consequences of her actions and the harm it caused both of them. Now, when it comes to Venom, it's very easy to say that his main rival he hates most is Peter Parker, Spider-Man. But Venom more so longs for Peter. That's like his perfect ideal host. But when Venom's offspring, Carnage, bonded with a complete psychopath in Cletus Cassidy and the desire to end the lives and cause destruction, Venom found a new rival. At that point in time, for Venom and Eddie Brock, Eddie and the other hosts of Venom over time have instilled this sort of odd desire to do good in the symbiote. Venom can be bad, but he is good enough to know that Carnage is really bad, and Venom would even put aside his hatred for Spider-Man to fight Carnage alongside the Web Slinger the first time they ever came to blows. That's a pretty serious thing for Venom. Carnage has been Venom's #1 enemy ever since. The villain Bullseye is just not a nice guy, and the evidence for that statement can be found in his history with his rival Daredevil. Not only was he an original Daredevil villain, first appearing in Daredevil 131, but their rivalry became more and more personal, especially when we learned that Bullseye had become completely obsessed with his defeats to Daredevil, even hurting others like Black Widow just to get Matt Murdock. But Bullseye just completely lost it when the Man Without Fear defeated him yet again. Now he literally started to see strangers on the street as Daredevil and would promptly send them to the afterlife for that reason. But I'd be remiss if I didn't say the rivalry became personal for Daredevil too, especially after two separate occasions where Bullseye had ended the lives of Matt Murdock's biggest love interest in Elektra and Karen Page. Kingpin started out as a Spider-Man villain. It was never personal, except maybe when Spider-Man embarrassed Wilson Fisk in front of an entire prison for hurting Peter's Aunt May. He's not Spider-Man's main rival. Another closer contender for that role would be Dr. Octopus. But look, if we are being honest with each other here, the personal connections and personal attacks against Spider-Man that belong to Norman Osborn, Green Goblin, have absolutely made a bigger splash in Peter's life than anything any other villain has done. Green Goblin orchestrated the Clone Saga, one of the most infamous Spider-Man stories that saw the hero completely doubt who he was, and he did it all from the shadows. After taking the life of Gwen Stacy and coming back from his own demise, Norman makes Peter's life as miserable as he can because he absolutely hates that guy, and Peter, despite being a hero, can only trust Norman Osborn as far as he can throw him. Funnily enough though, Spider-Man isn't the only person hated by Green Goblin. For a short while, Norman Osborn's character was thought to be deceased, but the pressure was on to have a character like the Green Goblin who was so fun and insane and wild. Roger Stern decided that instead of just bringing Norman back, he'd create a new villain. Shady business mogul Roderick Kingsley stumbled onto one of Norman Osborn's old hideouts filled with Green Goblin equipment. He then took some time and actually improved said equipment and became the Hobgoblin. Despite some obvious differences, when Norman did return, he didn't take too kindly to his idea being basically copied. Green Goblin and Hobgoblin have developed a long-lasting rivalry that has exploded into violent battles that have nearly taken out both characters on several occasions, and the rivalry even spilled into when other characters took up the respective titles. When it comes to Deadpool, it seems that he doesn't seem to have his own dedicated villain, but I can assure you he does. The one who may just be his number one goes to the name T-Ray. T-Ray was introduced in 1997's Deadpool #1 as another merc who competed with Deadpool to be the best mercenary in Hell House, a mercenary dispatch center that Deadpool frequented. To that end, he basically became like Deadpool's Sabretooth. T-Ray set Deadpool's mask on fire, setting Wade into a panic. Typhoid Mary later impersonated Siren and slept with Wade as part of T-Ray's plan to mess with Deadpool. After psychologically breaking Deadpool, T-Ray nearly wiped him out physically and took over the Hell House. T-Ray also resurrected Wade's wife, Mercedes Wilson, before attacking him again. Deadpool was led to believe that T-Ray had taken out Mercedes years later, making their rivalry all the more personal. During the battle, however, it was revealed that T-Ray was actually the original Wade Wilson. T-Ray claimed that Deadpool was a mercenary who murked his wife, Mercedes, and stole his name. As a result, T-Ray trained to become a mercenary and get his revenge on Deadpool. Over the years, it became unclear who the original Wade Wilson really was between Deadpool and T-Ray, but no matter who it was, these two have a dark past that constantly brings them back into conflict. There is another Deadpool rival who I want to talk about. His name is Thanos. However, this rivalry is all over a girl or a cosmic entity, really. See, for the longest time, Thanos had been simping hard for Mistress Death, the literal embodiment of it in the Marvel Universe. But because of Deadpool's many run-ins with Death itself and how he basically keeps escaping her, this lady has been a little bit interested in the merc for a hot minute now, and Wade fell hard for her as well. The big purple problem is Thanos. Thanos had essentially cursed Deadpool with immortality, literally vowing to find a way to resurrect Deadpool anytime he manages to actually pass away and get some sleep, for the sole purpose of keeping Wade and the Mistress away from each other. It's clear that the hate is there on Thanos' side of things, even if it's just born from jealousy. Other than that, Thanos just also enjoys doing horrible things to Deadpool because he can. He's an absolute psychopath after all. For our last point today, we're talking about the King of Atlantis, Namor, the Submariner, and the King of Wakanda, the Black Panther. Now, both being kings of powerful nations, they lay outside the normal bounds of geopolitics. You'd think they'd be strong allies, but they hate each other. Black Panther is a cold, calculating, stoic guy who thinks logically and isn't really that friendly. Namor is a loud, brash, emotional, and arrogant king who likes to brag a lot and is more extroverted, but is still also not very friendly either. They had respect for each other in the past, but then Namor basically destroyed more than half of Wakanda with a massive tidal wave when he had the powers of the Phoenix. Black Panther would then join the Illuminati, and during the incursions, the Wakanda armies attacked Atlantis. Then, and though they worked out things a bit, T'Challa brutally beat the absolute snot out of Namor, who just destroyed an alternate Earth, and he and Black Bolt of the Inhumans would basically doom Namor to another world that was being destroyed by an incursion.
Guy Gardner is probably the greatest Green Lantern to rub multiple people the wrong way, but especially Batman. Though, to be fair to Guy, he didn't just annoy Batman, Batman also annoyed him. And it's true that many Green Lanterns do seem to rub the Dark Knight the wrong way. We're gonna talk about that more later on in this list, but for now let's focus on Guy. When it comes to Batman's feud with Guy, it's often summed up in one intense moment that happened between them. During their time together on the Justice League, at one point Guy feels that he would be a better leader than Batman and just decides to challenge him for the right to lead the team via a fist fight. To make the fight fair and prove his own fighting prowess, Guy decides to ditch his ring. All in all, a massive mistake, as without it, Batman is able to take him out in one single punch. For some reason, Superman has this crazy obsession with beating the Flash at his own thing, being fast. Well, you might think I'm exaggerating here, as you know, there have been a few times where Superman simply wanted to catch Flash because he was being mind controlled, or he was going to run to his death, or needed some sense talked into him to help him basically. I can also guarantee that there are many panels and instances that hint at Superman's competitive nature and his desire to prove himself as simply faster than the Flash. He has also had countless foot races with countless Flashes, and almost every time has either tied or lost, with more losses than ties, I believe, at this point. Yet even though they have been racing since the 1960s, in 2011 Superman is chasing Barry Allen's Flash in Superman issue 709 and is still seen wondering to himself in a panel, which of them is faster? Is it me? Is it the Flash? Who's really faster here? Give it up, Superman. Guess what? It's not you. Quit trying to take this one thing away from the Flash. You have a million other things you're great at. I think we could just let the Flash have this one, no? When I think of Wonder Woman versus Superman, the first thought that comes to my mind is always Wonder Woman Dead Earth. It's just such a stunning, beautiful, and yet horrific and gritty comic. Usually Diana and Clark are good friends in the comics. This is also how they start out in Dead Earth, but due to a devastating loss, a schism happens between them, ultimately resulting in them becoming rivals and just straight up enemies. We see these two fight in a flashback where Diana decides to take out her fury and her frustration on Clark, blaming Superman for what man's world has done to her home and her family, especially her mom. There was a nuclear strike on Themyscira in this Elseworld, but while that likely had some global effects, at least, what really destroys the world is actually Superman and Wonder Woman fighting each other. They fly around the world, and the collateral damage from their fight wreaks havoc on their surroundings throughout it. In the end, it is shown that Wonder Woman won this fight by punching Superman through his chest. However, she ends up suffering from amnesia, and she actually doesn't recall their fight until issue number 3 of the series, realizing that she's kind of to blame for everything that's happening in this Dead Earth. Martian Manhunter was there when John Stewart's Green Lantern let an entire planet be destroyed as a result of his ego. The two were deployed to the planet in the hopes of saving it, but Green Lantern didn't feel that he needed Martian Manhunter's help and instead decided to send John away. Unfortunately, this was soon after proven to be a mistake, as when John Stewart found the explosive on this planet and the room it was contained in and found that they were painted entirely yellow, preventing John from using his Green Lantern powers to do anything to destroy or defuse it, he was kind of put in a pickle there. Yikes. As a result, the planet was destroyed, with only John surviving the explosion, leaving Martian Manhunter grossly disappointed in his colleague Green Lantern and in Green Lantern's hubris here. Though granted, Martian Manhunter wasn't so mad that he felt Green Lantern should simply just end it all. In fact, John is the one who questions Stewart and prevents him from taking his own life after his tragic failing. When it comes to the Bat family, there are quite a few feuds to be had, unsurprisingly. I mean, it's a big family tree, and you know how families are, they like to fight sometimes. Still, I think one of the most dramatic was the one between Tim Drake and Damian Wayne. Initially, when these two met, they seemingly got off on the wrong foot, and Tim wanted to try and just offer an olive branch. This came in the form of offering to spar with young Damian, with Tim promising to take it easy on him. However, everything quickly went awry when Damian revealed that earlier in the night he'd actually killed a criminal, the Spook, taking his head. The two ended up fighting for real, and Damian knocks out Robin's Tim Drake, leaving him bleeding on the floor of the Batcave and donning a version of his costume when he goes to confront his father, letting Batman know that he's ready to replace Tim as Robin. Batman ends up, of course, returning and retrieving Tim, helping to fix up the damage that Damian did. Eventually, these two would move past this feud, but for a while there, it was basically life-threatening. Oh boy, does Catwoman have a reason to have beef with Zatanna. These two ended up in a fight with one another after it was revealed that Catwoman may have only become a full-fledged hero as a result of Zatanna manipulating her mind. Because of this revelation, Catwoman turned on Zatanna, with the two getting into a physical fight. In the end, Selina was rightly pissed at Z after learning this, feeling like she had never in her life been more violated than she was when Zatanna changed her against her will. It also made Catwoman question whether or not she was actually the hero she had become at this point. Because I mean, if that wasn't her choice, was that really her doing that? Since she just had no choice in the matter, because Zatanna changed her mind. One of the most iconic feuds in DC Comics isn't necessarily a real narrative feud. I mean, these two don't typically go after one another to just fight each other needlessly. They don't really have much of a reason to be jealous of the other or even dislike them, but they do end up pitted against each other often in alternate realities, and just because people like to see who would win if they got into a fight, because they're similar. In most cases, because they're so evenly matched, it generally ends in a standstill or with Superman implied as the victor. While Superman might be weak to Shazam's magic, Shazam is often forced to transform back into Billy by Superman's tactics. Who do you think is more powerful? Do you think it's Shazam or do you think it's Superman? I don't know, but we like to see them fight. We like to see what would happen, who's really stronger. I think I would still go for Superman, but I do think Shazam being magical is like a huge asset in a fight against Superman. This is a long-standing rivalry that kind of makes sense when you consider Batman had to put up with the antics of Guy Gardner, trying to steal command of the Justice League from him, and of course Hal Jordan mooning him, which is totally a thing that happened. But Batman's rivalry with the Green Lantern superseded even just these two sometimes jerks. Batman has even had beef with John Stewart, one of my favorite Green Lanterns. John Stewart comes at him for all the Green Lantern hate that he spews, calling him out as a man who is just threatened by Hal Jordan because Hal isn't afraid of him. Rather than admit that not seeing eye to eye with Hal is maybe a bit of a two-way street, Batman just decides to double down here. He really doesn't like Green Lanterns, telling John exactly how it is. I mean, I get it in terms of Hal and Guy's cases, but John? Really? You're gonna let a feud form there too, just because of the other Green Lanterns? Yipes. I mean, I get it. I just feel like Batman doesn't trust Green Lanterns, but it's John Stewart. I feel like you could trust John Stewart. He doesn't even wear a mask, you know? He doesn't even want to hide his face. John Stewart, proud man. These two are heroes who both adopted mantles from other heroes. Wally West became the Flash after Barry Allen, and Kyle Rayner replaced Hal Jordan's Green Lantern. The pair consistently mock one another and often try to debase each other, criticizing one another left, right, and center. This feud started as soon as the two pretty much met, and it actually stems from the fact that they simply think the other is just not good enough to replace the former hero who wore the costume previous to them. Which is interesting because almost everyone else around them thinks that they both do a good job. Rather than just accept that they are both doing their best and both are good in different ways, they choose to bicker and compete at almost every opportunity they get, at least initially. Maybe this comes from some own insecurity within themselves to begin with, of not feeling confident in their own ability to carry on the mantle of the hero who came before them. So they see someone else who's doing it and they just kind of take out that insecurity they have within themselves on the other person. I think they might be projecting. These two are often thought of as being the best of friends, and well, they are, but that doesn't mean that they don't have a rivalry. In fact, in some realities, the differences between them lead the two to becoming sworn enemies, as opposed to staying the best of friends. The best thing about these two heroes, in fact, is how different they both are to one another, and perhaps what has made their rivalry and their friendship so strong throughout the years and throughout DC's multiverse and the history of the multiverse is that they both see how much they differ. In some cases, they deeply respect and admire each other's differences. In other cases, it actually leads them to try and break their once fellow colleague, unable to reconcile and accept the other's differences. And we've seen this multiple times. I'm not just talking about Batman v Superman, I'm not just talking about Injustice. It happens. It happens.
Number 10. Batman and Green Lanterns. I don't know about you guys, but I have always sort of loved how Batman and various different Green Lanterns just kind of never get along. Actually, he has this weird thing against Green Arrow as well. I'm thinking maybe Bruce just hates the color green in general. No, it usually has more to do with the attitudes and personalities of the individuals themselves. So, for example, Batman and Guy Gardner had a pretty obvious disdain for each other when they were both part of Justice League International. and it eventually led to Batman straight up punching the lights out of Guy Gardner. Now, to be fair, no one likes Guy Gardner, he's just kind of the worst. Even the rest of the Justice League International were like, yeah, that guy needs to shut up. And they all left for their mission after Batman knocked him out, just leaving him laying there on the floor. There was also the time Hal Jordan came back to life after the little parallax thing happened, and Batman did not trust this guy one bit. Batman kept getting in the way of Hal, who was trying to actually go and defeat Parallax properly. In this case, it was Hal who did the punching, and Batman kinda deserved it, but he still got his comeuppance for that one. Also, when the Justice League came together for the first time in the newer continuities, I think after New 52, Batman was just like a little sneaky prankster to Hal and stole the power ring off him just to be like, I'm better than you. It's kind of hilarious. Batman has also scolded Green Lantern Simon Baz for carrying a blam blam, and he's had shouting matches and beat the snot out of Green Arrow for speaking up against Batman. It's a bit of a lighter rivalry, but I swear he's got something against the color green. I think it's a fact. Number 9, Aquaman and Black Manta. While Aquaman has two major villains with Ocean Master and Black Manta, the latter of the two just goes the extra sadistic step with this villainy. Black Manta is a man who will go into and come out of retirement based on whether Aquaman is around or not, and the rivalry has just gotten more and more personal for them both over the years. In fact, it kind of rivals all other rivalries, but it is Aquaman, and as much as we all love Jason Momoa, Aquaman, it just ain't that cool, man. He just ain't that cool. He has been, I don't deny it, and the Aquaman stans are going to come at me for this one, but if you like him, let me know in the comments and give me 3 reasons why that don't stem from the fact that everybody hates on him. But back to the point, Aquaman was convinced that Black Manta was responsible for the passing of Aquaman's dad. And he very well might have been, but Arthur's quest for vengeance on that one brought about the accidental end of Manta's dad, so of course Manta needed his revenge, and so he pitted Aquaman against Aqualad by trapping Arthur's wee bab in a bubble of air, causing it to suffocate if the Aqua allies didn't duke it out. And even though they totally did duke it out, it didn't stop anything. And then, even later on, Aquaman even took on Manta's son as a protege, which is like a huge insult to the villain who is arguably your #1 rival. That part was actually kind of cool. I'll give Aquaman that one. That one thing that you did was kind of cool. Also when you had the hook for your arm, that was cool too. Number 8, Black Lightning and Tobias Whale. Black Lightning simply does not get enough love, but his comics and even the show are actually pretty cool. His main rival, Tobias Whale, was the leader of the gang called the 100, and Jefferson Pierce, Black Lightning, decided that he was going to become pretty outspoken against this group, which prompted Whale to take out one of Pierce's students. This is what created Black Lightning in the first place, but it wasn't the only beef the two shared. Pretty much like Aquaman, Whale had a large hand in the passing of Pierce's dad. After a while, the rivalry would actually travel over to Gotham City, where Tobias decided to try and establish himself there, and he and his gang were a bit too much for Black Lightning, who had to call on Superman for help, which I also think is kind of lame. He could have definitely handled it on his own. But I mean, where Black Lightning called on Superman, there was a time that Tobias called on a demonic entity, so I mean, tit for tat, I guess. If you haven't already, be sure to drop a like on this video if you like it. Your support really helps us out. Also, we have another video that goes over some of Marvel's biggest rivalries as well, so definitely check that out. But in at number 7 is Deathstroke and the Teen Titans. If you have watched the animated Teen Titans series, then you know their #1 most persistent villain is Deathstroke Slade Wilson. His cunning, intense, immoral way of completing his missions have made him incredibly hard to bring down, even compared to other massive threats the Titans face. But over time, guess what? Yes, that's right, it became hella personal. Deathstroke's son, Ravager, had his life ruined after Starfire crashed into his apartment, and then Ravager and Deathstroke fought the Titans together until Ravager passed away in his own dad's arms, which then compounded Deathstroke's hate for the Titans since he blamed them for it. And then we have the massive can of worms known as the Judas Contract. Here, the Titans welcome a new member onto the team who ends up being Rose Wilson, the daughter of Slade. She goes and betrays the team and takes up the Ravager moniker after her brother, and that also ended not very well. It's just a whole whack of hate composed in one person. Deathstroke. I'm talking about Deathstroke. Number 6. Superman and Brainiac. Finally, a rivalry that isn't predominantly fueled by personal tragedy. No, in this instance, the rivalry is just so good because it brings out a whole other side of the Man of Steel, his intelligent side. Whenever Superman goes up against Brainiac, his incredible strength begins to fall at the wayside. Brainiac has even beaten the Man of Steel a few times, and what's interesting is that Brainiac is actually the one here who has made a bunch of personal blows on the Man of Steel. Usually it's a bit more fair with heroes also making a few mistakes, but because Superman is DC's golden boy, we can't have him messing up too much now, can we? Or, if he does, it had better be in an alternate storyline.
Brainiac shrank Kandor and Krypton and carried them around as part of his collection.
Another time Brainiac had Superman distracted, which opened the door for him to get at Jonathan Kent. Superman has teamed up with General Zod against Brainiac. It goes that far sometimes, but my absolute favorite Brainiac moment is probably one of his kind of smaller ones. It's actually in Superman Red Sun, but I'll let you check that out for yourself because I'm moving on. To number 5, Flash and Eobard Thawne. Things are definitely real when you will travel through time to not only fight your rival, but then travel through time again to change their entire reality. What's really weird here is that Eobard Thawne was actually a huge fan of the Flash, but being from the future, and because time just be like that sometimes, he surprisingly learned that the Flash's greatest villain, Reverse Flash, was Eobard Thawne himself, and then he made sure that this came to pass, kind of like a weird manifest destiny thing. He got powers similar to the Flash, went back in time, and worked alongside Wally West, pretending to be the Flash himself, Barry Allen. Thawne claims responsibility for taking down the Flash family. He destroyed Wally West's life, and probably the most pivotal Flash story, Flashpoint, involved Thawne and Barry battling through time, with Barry attempting to stop Thawne from taking the life of Nora Allen, Barry's mom, which caused a whole different reality to form, and Thawne observed the whole thing, mocking Barry pretty much the whole time. Eobard Thawne found out he was supposed to be a villain, and so he decided he was going to go extremely hard with that and be the most dastardly devil you ever did see. Number 4, Sinestro and Hal Jordan. Sinestro has a serious case of the jealousy. Throughout, Sinestro was considered to be the absolute best of the best that the Green Lantern Corps had to offer, and he was proud of that fact. He even trained the unlikely Hal Jordan to become a Green Lantern, but then Hal went and became the greatest Green Lantern, and that inspired no kindness from little old Sinestro. Nuh-uh-uh. Sinestro hated Hal to a degree. There was also this whole thing of opposing morals. Sinestro held a point that fear and deadly force were the best ways to improve not only the world but the universe, and Hal helped Sinestro's own planet turn against him. And then Sinestro was kicked out of the Green Lantern Corps. Instead, he literally forged the Yellow Power Ring and created the Yellow Lantern Corps itself, aka the Sinestro Corps. They have had some pretty damn intense battles, and Sinestro was pretty instrumental in that whole little parallax thing that we've talked about before. Now, I don't know about you guys, but Sinestro is also incredibly good at being a huge jerk to Hal, but all while being incredibly entertaining to read. Like, I'm definitely a fan of Sinestro over Hal Jordan, and I'm not afraid to say that. Number 3, Shazam and Black Adam. If you think about it, the feud between these two magic powerhouses is probably the longest in the Earth's history. It goes all the way back to ancient Egypt, and the fun part here is that while Black Adam has done some truly horrible and villainous things, he's not really considered to be as much of a villain as some of the other villains who are on this list. He has still massacred an entire country for no reason, but yeah, definitely an anti-hero, for sure. Black Adam fights for the oppressed and is a champion for his people, but he will use any means necessary to do that. When he became the champion of the wizard Shazam, Black Adam's methods caused the wizard to trap the champion in an amulet. Now, it took centuries for the wizard to choose a new champion, and that was Billy Batson. This didn't happen though until a man would betray and end the lives of Billy's parents so that he could reawaken Black Adam. So now, the wizard's old violent champion and his new heroic one are on Earth at the same time, and Black Adam ain't too happy about that, going to incredibly sadistic lengths to try and stop Billy, who is one of the few characters that can actually oppose and stop Black Adam at all. And he has on multiple occasions, just growing the hatred between the two of them. Coming in at number 2, Superman and Lex Luthor. Let's be honest, with only 2 spots left on this list, most people knew what was coming here. While Brainiac is an incredibly great villain for Superman, challenging the Man of Steel with his intelligence more than even this incredibly intelligent Lex Luthor can, Lex has a burning, unsated hatred for Superman, vast amounts of wealth, and an understanding of people's base instincts that allow him to top pretty much everyone else in Superman's rogues gallery. What's interesting is that he didn't start that way. He didn't hate Superman so intensely at first, but after years and years and years of having his plans specifically thwarted by Superman himself, he really just became the #1 thing that infuriated Lex beyond belief. The story, How Much Can One Man Hate, is actually a really good display of why Luthor absolutely abhors Kal-El. The story showed that Luthor's hatred for Superman was kind of born out of the praise and admiration that the Kryptonian received without ever needing to work really that hard for it. Of course, Lex orchestrated the events that took place in the Death of Superman story, with Lex taking down his arch-nemesis. Additionally, All-Star Superman saw their rivalry come to an end, with Superman being taken off the board yet again by Lex Luthor's schemes. Lex himself is probably one of the best villains in comic book history, but I think a lot of us would have a hard time saying that when we know about the villain of the #1 spot. And in #1, yeah, you probably guessed it, it's Batman and the Joker. These two are almost complete polar opposites. One stands for order, the other for chaos. One uses fear as a weapon against injustice, while the other turns laughter into the scariest thing you can possibly imagine. Batman is fueled by an idea, and the Joker has, well, basically no motivation at all, or that motivation changes depending on how he feels. Batman vows to preserve life while beating criminals to a pulp and leaving them in hospital beds, while the Joker almost always just leaves people without the ability to take another breath. This all started way back in 1951 when DC first introduced the Joker in The Man Behind the Red Hood. Before even becoming the Clown Prince of Crime, this unnamed man was on the run from Batman and leapt into a vat of acid, creating the Joker in the first place. So, honestly, Batman himself kinda created the Joker, like indirectly. There are some truly pivotal epic stories in DC Comics that involve this rivalry. The Killing Joke, The White Knight, The Dark Knight Returns, Batman Endgame, A Death in the Family, Death of the Family, Joker's 5-Way Revenge, 3 Jokers, Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on a Serious Earth. All of them are highly recommended and show this rivalry at its peak.
#10, Spider-Man and the Human Torch. In one of his earliest adventures, Spider-Man broke into the Baxter Building in an attempt to impress the Fantastic Four, in hopes of being invited to join the team. This led to a misunderstanding and a conflict between Spider-Man and the team. Although this encounter left both sides with a bad taste in their mouths, it was Peter and Johnny who had the most tension between them, due to Johnny's need to be seen as tough and manly, and Peter being reminded of the popular kids who used to pick on him, like Flash Thompson. The Fantastic Four eventually came around to the webbed wall crawler, and Spidey and the Torch became close friends, even referring to each other as brothers. But a friendly rivalry remained between the two. This is perhaps best memorialized in Amazing Spider-Man number 657, when we got a glimpse of a camping trip taken by the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man. The two began an elaborate and ever-escalating prank war, with some highlights being Human Torch heating up a bowl of water to try and get a sleeping Spider-Man to wet himself, Spider-Man covering the toilet paper with webbing, Johnny using sunscreen and his powers to write the words "Flame On" Spidey's back, and Peter creating a fake shark fin out of webbing to scare the Human Torch when he was swimming. The two put a pause to their prank war in order to team up to play an elaborate trick on the Thing, so while the two heroes have nothing but love and respect for each other, their friendly rivalry seems to bring nothing but joy to each of them, which is a nice change from all the other entries on this list who seem to genuinely hate each other.
Do Andrew and I have a friendly rivalry, or do we have a rivalry where we hate each other?
I hate you.
I only have the utmost respect for Andrew, so we'll have to resolve this at another time. Also, a quick reminder, if you like this video, you should do the things that people do when they like stuff, like click like or subscribe. #9, Moonstone and Miss Marvel. Speaking of rivalries where people hate each other, I also know a lot of people might not know who Moonstone is, and might say, Amanda, there are bigger rivalries than this one that you could be covering right now. And hey, I hear you. But while this list is about biggest rivalries, I also like to keep things fresh by touching on characters and relationships in lists like this that we don't often get to talk about. One, because it helps me to stay sane by not telling you about the same stuff on repeat because, you know, been here for a while, guys. And 2, it's just fun to learn new things. I love learning new things, and I hope you do too. So for those of you who don't know, Moonstone was a member of the Thunderbolts and is Carla Sofin. From day one, she was pretty much a straight up villain. Even when she was a psychiatrist before she got her powers, she was a pretty mean and awful psychiatrist, to be honest. At one point, she becomes the Dark Avengers version of Miss Marvel, standing in for Carol Danvers, who refused to join up with Norman Osborn's team, understandably, and who at the time was known as Miss Marvel. This was before Carol took up the mantle of her former mentor, Mar-Vell, and became Captain Marvel. As a result, the two ended up becoming adversaries, and after Carol dies and is resurrected, Carla fights her for the title of Miss Marvel. She kinda loses this fight, but in a weird twist, she also finds herself again during it, becoming Moonstone once more, with Carol also becoming whole again as a result. Also, for those who are wondering, this is who Carol was fighting in the thumbnail / the cover photo, if you would prefer, for our part 1 to this list, which you should definitely check out if you haven't done that already.
I don't actually hate Amanda. I just hate that she's clearly more popular than me.
What?
Number 8. North Star and Guardian. I know, I have an Alpha Flight problem, just deal with it. Compared to other Marvel teams like the Avengers or certainly the X-Men, Canada's super team, Alpha Flight, has been relatively free from interpersonal conflict. Part of this is because of how the team is divided up across the country and rarely actually have to team up with everyone, and partly because Canadians are so polite that rivalries are much harder to spot. However, 2 teammates who have never gotten along are Jean-Paul Beaubier and James MacDonald Hudson. Hudson thinks of Jean-Paul as an arrogant, petulant jerk, and Jean-Paul thinks of Hudson as a manipulative government stooge. Both characters have relatively valid points, and as someone who wants Quebec to be its own separate nation, it makes sense that North Star would have an issue with the guy dressed in the Canadian flag. But what is the source of this rivalry? Before the formation of Alpha Flight, North Star believed himself to be an only child, but when Hudson began searching Canada for potential members of his super team, he discovered both North Star and his long-lost twin sister, Jean-Marie. He introduced the two and made both of them members of Alpha Flight, giving them the opportunity to get to know each other while serving as team members. You'd think that would make North Star relatively grateful, but when they discovered that Jean-Marie was actually mentally unstable, suffering from dissociative identity disorder, North Star wanted her removed from the team for her own well-being. She refused to leave, and Hudson allowed her to stay, making North Star believe that Hudson was taking advantage of her poor mental health to keep a powerful team member around. The two have had a rocky relationship ever since, with North Star openly insulting Guardian in the field, and Guardian mostly brushing it off unless it begins to interfere with the mission. Despite their issues, they are capable of supporting each other from time to time, with North Star reluctantly attending James's funeral the first time he died, and James showing up in uniform to North Star's wedding in Astonishing X-Men number 51.
I'm the Human Torch and you're Spider-Man, and you're mine.
I can live with that.
Oh my gosh. Also guys, show Andrew that he's also popular and give him love in the comments. Number 7. Madam Mask and Hawkeye. No, not that Hawkeye. This Hawkeye. Madam Mask has beef with a few heroes and some kind of weird romances too, but that's for another list. Like her relationship with Iron Man, which is a love affair, but then it can also be adversarial too, since, you know, she's a villain. Anyways, with Kate Bishop's Hawkeye, these two developed beef after Kate attempted to help out Clint Barton's Hawkeye while he was trying to retrieve a tape from a black market auction that showed him assassinating a dictator. Don't worry though, Clint didn't really do this. The tape was actually a fake to help protect the true identity of the agent who completed the mission on S.H.I.E.L.D.'s Black Ops team. Kate ended up impersonating Madam Mask at the auction, wearing her mask and her clothes after incapacitating her, something Madam Mask would not easily forget and would actually swear revenge on her for, hence their rivalry.
At least we can all agree that Adam's the worst of us, right? Number 6. Hulk and the Red Hulk. When Bruce Banner transformed into the Hulk in his first appearance, he stumbled across Betty Ross. The sight of the Hulk caused Betty to faint, and her father, Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross, vowed to destroy the monster. This has led to one of the longest rivalries in Marvel history, as Ross has used his position as a general to hunt Banner across the world, hoping to either capture or kill him. The fact that Banner managed to defeat other threats such as the Abomination led Ross to eventually develop a grudging respect for him, but the hate never really died down, not even once Bruce married Ross's daughter, making the man his son-in-law. They came to terms briefly, but once Betty was killed, the rivalry fired up again. The rivalry reached new heights when Ross teamed up with villains such as MODOK and the Leader to transform himself into the Red Hulk. After years of stewing hatred, Ross was able to actively fight the Hulk and even defeat him in their first encounter. The Hulk of course eventually bounced back and took out Ross. Ross has bounced around with his allegiances, having been everything from a villain to an Avenger, but whatever side he is on, he never turns down an opportunity to make life difficult for Banner or the Hulk.
Then Adam is the thing, and then we can both prank Adam together. Adam, if you're watching this video, watch out, but you're probably not, so haha, we're gonna get you. Number 5, Storm and Emma Frost. A lot of people obsess over the rivalry over Scott Summers, aka Cyclops, that exists between Jean Grey and Emma Frost in the comics, but this rivalry between Emma and Aurora runs honestly even deeper. It comes from a time when Emma was still a villain, the White Queen of the Hellfire Club, and ended up body swapping with Storm. Needless to say, Storm was not very happy with the White Queen and held a grudge against her for years thereafter, the whole body swap incident. Body swapping is so creepy in stories, like that is a total violation of someone's privacy in like a whole other way. Talk about evil. I mean, I guess unless you are like consensually swapping bodies with someone, then it's just kind of weird with the potential I suppose to even be cool. Even in the Jean Grey and Emma Frost giant-sized comic that came out only a few years ago, it was shown that Storm still thinks of Emma as her rival, even though they are both now technically allies and both sit on Krakoa's Quiet Council.
Number 4, Daredevil and the Punisher. When it comes to the good guys of the Marvel Universe, there's somewhat of a spectrum of morality, with most of them falling somewhere in the middle. While a lot of characters like say Iron Man aren't kill crazy, they also aren't above taking the lives of their enemies if it comes down to it. On opposite ends of the spectrum, you have Daredevil and the Punisher. While Daredevil is strictly against murder and will avoid it at all costs, only resorting to it when under mind control or when he has literally no other choice, like when he killed the helicopter pilot who was using a minigun to turn Hell's Kitchen into a war zone and killing several people a minute in Daredevil number 233. On the other end of the spectrum is Frank Castle, otherwise known as the Punisher, who goes out of his way to murder as many criminals as possible, believing that people are incapable of changing. This difference of methodology of course has caused the two to come to blows several times over the years, as Daredevil tries to stop crimes and put criminals away with the legal system, while Frank has no faith in the system and usually tries to kill every criminal he comes across. The two are known to try and convince one another that their way is better, sometimes in very extreme ways, such as in Punisher Volume 5 number 3, where Frank chained Daredevil to a roof with a gun taped to his hand, telling him that he must shoot him in order to prevent him from killing a criminal. This rivalry has spawned some of the best moments in each of the characters' history, as well as a mini-series called Daredevil vs. Punisher, which is of course completely devoted to this rivalry.
Number 3, She-Hulk and Titania. She-Hulk and Titania have a very interesting relationship in the comics, and while they may be on more friendly terms now in regards to Titania moving away from being a true criminal, as so many Marvel villains have done in recent years, these two ladies are still rivals. In fact, they even came together to kind of celebrate the love of their rivalry in a friendly manner by creating, in essence, a fight club for others to get together and blow off steam. Although initially Jen did suggest that it's just kind of a fight club between them two exclusively. Titania and She-Hulk make for excellent rivals because they are both fierce, determined characters who are well known for their strength and indomitability. In fact, they have a lot in common. And when they fight one another, because they are both so tough, neither has to really worry about actually hurting the other, as they are fairly evenly matched. Also, you know their rivalry is iconic when it's used as the opener for a She-Hulk series, which it was recently in the 2022 She-Hulk comic by Rainbow Rowell. And if you aren't reading this comic, by the way, you need to be. Trust me.
Number 2, The Thing and the Hulk. Although many would say that the Hulk is the strongest one there is, Ben Grimm might disagree. These two super strong heroes have gone toe-to-toe several times over the years, starting their conflict over 60 years ago in Fantastic Four number 25. Their fights are always an event fans look forward to, with no clear and consistent winner ever really being named. In their first conflict, Ben was able to come out on top, likely because of his ability to keep a cool, clear head throughout the fight. In their next fight, in Incredible Hulk number 122, Hulk had to fight the entire Fantastic Four, but managed to hold his own before eventually being taken down. Their next one-on-one bout in Fantastic Four number 112 ended with the Hulk landing a devastating and almost lethal right hook on the Thing, giving him his first victory. They fought again in Fantastic Four number 167, but Ben began transforming back into his human form, giving Hulk a massive advantage. Their next fight in Fantastic Four 320 ended in a victory for the Thing, but Hulk was in his Grey Hulk form, thereby being half as strong as his usual green self. Grey Hulk had a rematch with the Thing in Incredible Hulk 350, which went more his way. They've had a couple more bouts since then, with the Hulk usually coming out on top, but despite this, the two have become friends, bonding over their experience as normal men transformed into something more. In issue 49 of The Immortal Hulk, we got to see how, despite everything, Ben will prioritize their friendship over their conflict when he took the time to comfort a Hulk who had just been attacked by the Avengers and make sure that he was okay before helping the Green Goliath in his quest to defeat the One Below All and the Leader. Despite this, it is likely likely only a matter of time before we see these two come to blows once again in the Marvel Universe.
Number 1. Wolverine and Cyclops. It's a rivalry as old as time. Well, not as old as time actually, but as old as Wolverine's first appearance almost. Wolverine and Cyclops have been known to butt heads almost since Wolverine first joined the team. Shortly after Wolverine joined up with the X-Men, Cyclops seemed to struggle with Wolverine's more aggressive nature, causing conflict between the two. And soon after joining, Wolverine developed feelings for Jean Grey, aka Marvel Girl, Scott's girlfriend, which also complicated the two superheroes' relationship and feelings towards one another. While they have always been rivals though, Scott and Logan are also like brothers. They've been through hell together as fellow X-Men, and while they may not always agree, they definitely also are more often willing to work together to help innocents and their fellow mutants. And that is a matter they do at least always agree on, that of helping those who need it. At the end of the day, they're both superheroes, and while they may fight from time to time, they will inevitably end up working back together as teammates, friends, and basically mutant brothers.